Let's start from a geographical introduction. You see, Venice is located in the very northern east part of Italy, actually in a very lucky position because on the Adriatic. The very first settlement of Venice probably dates back to the 5th century. And the people who were coming in Venice, actually, they didn't expect to be in a city, but they wanted to be protected from the barbarian invaders, who were sort of enemies from the north of Europe, who were used to conquer and destroy everything. So the first people who came to the lagoon were actually migrants, escaping from the barbarian invaders. They found the lagoon a very safe place because barbarians were not great to sail or swim. And so the lagoon offers a very protected area. Actually, very mild weather, good for a seafood production. And that's how the people started the Venetian history. Very slowly, century by century, they became good merchants because very great in building ships and boats. So the whole area you can see on this map that includes Greece, the Middle East, the northern coast of Africa, as well as France and Spain, became part of the trading areas for Venice. All the trading made the Venetians extremely rich, very open-minded from a cultural point of view, artistic point of view, and very rich also from an economical point of view too. So this is Venice. You see, it seemed to be like a fish with a tail on the very end, or that seemed to be like two hands like this. And the city is divided in the middle by the Grand Canal. The Grand Canal is the deeper canal of Venice that divides the city in two. And we have three neighborhoods on one side and three neighborhoods on the other side. So there's no big difference about living in the northern part or in the southern part. I can tell you that my husband is from Cannaregio and my father is from San Polo. So from two different sides of the Grand Canal, but there's no big difference. So Cannaregio is the very nice purple area you have on the top of the city. It's probably one of the most extended residential areas, famous also for having the Jewish part. Cannaregio offers both touristic attractions as well as some hidden nice corner for locals. Dorsoduro is probably my favorite neighborhood, is where the universities are. So if you want to experience like a youngest kind of vibe, that is the neighborhood where you can find something nice. Santa Croce, it's a smaller area with some very nice hidden jewel, and it's primarily on the Grand Canal. San Polo had been for centuries the area of merchants because San Polo is where the Rialto market is. So the majority of merchants' family had their home in San Polo area. Then we have San Marco, that is actually the most iconic area where the Doge's Palace is, where the Basilica is, so where all the most important symbols that remind us Venice are. And this also means on the other side that it's not a very residential place. Castello, on the very end of the fishtail, if you want to say that, it's the area where you can find more elderly people, but not just that, but it's a very calm area. And it's actually the only area in Venice where you can find parks and green. So it's very quiet and peaceful. I know, meeting my clients, I realize that sometimes there's a bit of confusion about the typical terms we use in Italy to define a place where to have dinner or lunch. So let me give you a couple of details about them, starting from a trattoria. Trattoria is like a family-owned restaurant. So the trattoria usually offers lunch service and dinner. But they will take few hours off in the afternoon and they won't be open until noon, more or less. So it's not a place where you can pop in for breakfast. The osteria, actually, it's more and more famous. It's a place where you can go from 11:30 a.m. to midnight, even just for a cappuccino or for a small snack, like we do here in Venice. And I'm going to tell you why. The osteria derives from the term oste, that actually can be translated into host, referring to the owner, who also is the person who cleans up table, makes coffee, takes order, but he's not a manager wearing a tie. Okay, so sometimes you cannot recognize who is the owner in the place, and they usually stays open the whole day. Locanda, it's another very important term for us. It's very similar to the concept of an osteria, but the locandas in the past always had few rooms upstairs for merchants. So the locanda had the function of offering also a place where the merchant could have meal, they could sleep, and the day after move to their final destination. Last thing, it's enoteca. Enoteca can be translated into wine shop. You can find some enotecas like this one, that is where I actually worked for almost 3 years near the Rialto Bridge, where they only sell bottles. So you cannot taste wine. You just go for buying your bottles of wine. But there are also some enoteca where you can taste some wine, but it won't be a wine bar, okay? It will be just a wine shop with a tasting room. That's it. But historically speaking, here in Venice, the osterias were something strictly regulated because of all the merchants, okay? So the main characteristic of an osteria was to be open and to offer a service with clean towels, bed linen for the guests coming to Venice for commerce. They were supposed to pay taxes, so they were actually official places, and it was not allowed to bandit, beggars, prostitutes to use the rooms upstairs. Okay, so it was very similar to the concept of a locanda I just described. But in Venice, the system of osteria became pretty popular because the culture of wine was very important for us. So you can see how osterias spread out, starting first of all in the area of San Polo, that is the area of the market. Wines were important for the culture of Venice, first of all, because having water was not always easy and accessible. So you can define 3 different places where Venetians could get their wine. The most important was called the Malvasia, and actually it defined a place where it was allowed to buy wines from far away, so like Puglia, so the very southern part of Italy, or Cyprus. And usually you could buy a typical kind of wine that was considered like a remedy for everything. The Malvasia was first of all a place for rich families. Instead, for the common people, it was common to go to a furattola, a place that actually was not allowed to sell wine, but wine was sold under the table. And their main specialty was the fried seafood called the fritto misto, basically because our culinary tradition is based on seafood. And so having some fried seafood was always easy and not very expensive. And then there was also the system of magasin. The magasin was the place that worked as a pawn shop, but people could have cash or wine when they were giving some object. So something very important to remember when you will be in Venice. The majority of our terms are in dialect, is not proper Italian. So if you try to translate, you won't find any translation from Malvasia, for example, to an Italian term. These three terms I just used are very related to the Venetian culture and to our dialect. Starting from the 18th century, osterias started to be called Baccaro. And actually, Baccaro is probably more iconic and sounds more familiar to you. I'm adding this very old picture now because it's very representative of what was the culture of wine and the function for merchants. So here you can see three merchants probably sealing a deal with some wine. Water was not accessible because the lagoon was, and actually is, brackish, so no fresh water, except the rain. The collection of rain was a very complex system thanks to system of cisterns. And this, of course, was related to the climate. And in summer, it was hard to have some rain, so hard to have fresh water. Venetian merchants had the tradition of sealing a deal with a business partner with a glass of wine because water was not accessible, or it was used for other things, more everyday things. You see that on the top of this picture, there's a tiny indication called alla giusta that is actually an invitation to be loyal, because having commerce in Venice was a very reliable thing and merchants loved to do that. On the back, you can see a tiny little lion with his face overlooking to merchants. The lion is Saint Mark. The patron of Venice is represented with a lion. And while you will be in Venice, you will find lions everywhere, even on a doorbell, because it's really the symbol of our culture.